committee for the Women's Giving Circle of Missoula County. This is my second year as chair, and it is just such an honor. But before I do anything, I just want to thank our panelists for agreeing to do this for us. We have Colin Lane, Brent Wahlberg, Jim Bashald.
Close enough.
You're going to forgive me.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
Thank you. Emily Armstrong, and our fabulous own on the steering committee, Molly Stockdale, will be our moderator again this year. I also want to thank Kathy Witkowski here, who's at our membership table. Is everyone here a member? Yes. Okay, if there's anyone who's not a member, if anyone wants to join, remember, you do not have to be a member of this circle where we give, we decide, we benefit together. We do this all together for the betterment of our beloved community. But you don't have to be a member to attend events. To vote, you do need to be a member. So Kathy is the one that helps you with all of that. And then I want to give a huge shout out to Katie Vaughn, who is our events person who coordinated this whole event. And our other steering committees that are present, the committee members that are present, sorry Mary, are Melise Hunter, Diane Adame, Jamie McConnell, and one of our newer steering committee members, Hannah Zuroff, who set the room up for us. But also, we do have one more song to sing, right? And I need Diane to lead it. So it is a birthday song because it's Hannah's birthday. So on her birthday, she ensured we had this safe space and place to be, and we'll speak more about that shortly. But if we could honor Hannah on her birthday with a song.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Hannah. Happy birthday to you.
So again, since we are all members and we're starting just a tad bit late, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but for our panelists, I want you to know that our mission is we inspire collaborative giving to strengthen our community. So we come together, our goal is to have 100-ish members. This year, it's the first year we're giving a $15,000 grant, but collectively, because together, our impact increases. And one of the things that make our giving circle somewhat unique is the minimum membership is $120. There's no real maximum. Most of our members give around between $200 to $300. I think it turned out to be like $239 and some change on an average when I did the math, but that was 24 hours ago and I'm getting older, so my memory isn't the same. And then the other thing is it's our vision that we have a community where all gifts have value, all donors have a voice, and all Missoula County benefits. And so each year what we do is we choose our focus, or what is our grant focus. So some people choose their grant focus for cycles like 3 to 5 years. We do it every year because the membership collectively votes on what our grant focus is. So this year, our grant focus is homelessness and housing.
Right.
Did you say it? Oh yeah, you gotta be loud. Loud. So our deadline, so our grant process, we moved our deadline around a little, and our grant opened July 15th. We close August 30th. So if you know of a nonprofit that may not yet know about us, they still have a week, little over a week, to get the grant in if they want to apply by August 30th. The steering committee, which we have 9 to 15 members, I think we currently have 12, choose the 3 finalists. And then we have a presentation from our finalists on the 17th of October, and then members have the opportunity to vote from October 17th to November 6th. We extended that because of our friends at MCAT. We want to thank you, Mary and MCAT. Great, oh sorry, I keep moving away from the mic. Thank you, Mary and MCAT, greatly for all that you do for our community and doing this, but we don't want to have them turn around the video in 24 hours, which we, I think, begged them. It wasn't a long turnaround time, so that people who aren't able to attend the presentation still get the benefit of seeing the finalists and what they present. So that's who we are and what we do. The winner will be announced on or around November 8th, And our hope is November 8th because we are a program of the Missoula Community Foundation. Their executive director, Marcy Allen, is here.
And a member.
And a member, and a very active member because she was fixing the PowerPoint for me at about 3 p.m. But we do this again. We give, we decide, and we benefit together for all of Missoula County. So this year, with our grant focus, it's kind of a big deal. But I don't want to take any more time on that because we have the expert moderator, Molly Stockdale, and I really want to talk about her brilliance.
Whose birthday was yesterday.
Whose birthday was, oh, it was. I sent you a birthday text.
Yeah, you
I
did.
forgot. That was 24 hours ago. You know, when I think of Molly, I get it. You've been really cool, involved with museums and nonprofits for 30 plus years. You're brilliant, you're a genius, but you're also kind and creative and really understand the purpose of how we come together and how when we collectively come together, empower people, right? And I see how I didn't say women and non-binary, I included the dudes. Yes. But empower people, and you do that so well, and you think in such brilliant ways. That's more what I want to say about you, but here's a bunch of other cool information about Molly. Got to work with Mr. Rogers, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But you are amazing, so
Thank you.
thank you. So now I'm going to turn it over to Molly. So you just say next, and I will navigate. I have 3 different presentations. I'll be
Okay,
navigating.
so I think we're just gonna start. I'm gonna kind of give the synopsis of introductions here. We do have a lot on slides as well, if people wanna learn a little bit more. But to my immediate left is Emily Armstrong, who is the Houseless Programs Manager with the City of Missoula. I had a lovely conversation with your boss today. The mayor was at another meeting with me, and so she was super excited that you were gonna be here and representing. I'll just say that Emily has worked in houselessness in Missoula for 4 years and has working on social impact issues at nonprofits in the public sector for 10 years. Moving on down the line, Jim Bichon is the Chief Executive Officer of Missoula Organization of Realtors, and I just say more. I think everybody kind of knows more. He's held all kinds of fascinating positions as COO for financial services organizations, but 20 years in data management, and is also a Grizz, so thank you for that. As a mom of a son who's in orientation this week at the university.
Boy, that just got on record, didn't it?
Brent is born and raised Missoulian and another Grizz, thank you very much.
Big Chris.
And he's been a realtor since 2000. And you're in partnership with your wife and your sister?
And my sister, yeah.
Are you
Previously
crazy?
with my mom, too.
Wow, wow. So that's pretty impressive. And it's also the president of the MOR board right now, the board. And at the end of the line here, last but not least, is Colin Lane, a principal architect with MMW. He went to the other school. Which is all okay, it's all okay. And he's been the project architect on some really big projects for MMW, as an expert in LEED, and a leader in energy modeling. So did we get that right?
Yeah, I've done housing my whole career, 25 years or so, and done a lot of work with nonprofits that you folks have supported.
Excellent.
So I'm really excited to be here.
Great, thank you. All right, so with those introductions, I wanted to give each panelist some time to kind of set the stage for us today. You can think about what you feel like the most pressing issues in the broad area of housing and homelessness, or maybe give us some background information on what steers your work. Just kind of set the stage for us. So we'll start with Emily.
Great. Thanks for having me here. Emily Armstrong. I use she, her pronouns. And if you want to pull up my slides, Dawn, that would be amazing. Yes, those
Gotcha.
ones. You're the best. Okay, so yeah, houseless programs manager at the city, and just for a kind of a broad understanding, our positionality within the landscape of houselessness work across Missoula is kind of the backbone support. We kind of serve as the system lead for the community, recognizing that all of our incredible nonprofits and community partners in Missoula are on the ground doing the really hard work every day and don't necessarily have the time or the capacity to scale back and look at kind of the vision of where we're going and making sure we're making connections and not duplicating. And so that's really where we come in. I often say that I call us professional lurkers. I just told a teammate that today in the audience. Truly that's our job a lot of the time, is to be in the spaces, to know what's going on, and be able to make connections where it's effective for our community, whether that's a funding connection or a program partnership. So that's kind of where I'm speaking from. That's our positionality within the work. And this we like to present at pretty much any public conversation, just to set kind of the landscape for what we're always working towards. And this is not something we have on lock in Missoula. We are not fully scoped out in all of these different categories, but this is always what we're working towards. We're always working to broaden our continuum of services as a community, from low barrier emergency shelter all the way up to permanent stable housing. And we do have, as you can see, various things along this continuum, but of course we always need more. We often talk about how the experience of becoming unhoused and being unhoused is unique to every individual, and as such we need a system and a landscape that's responsive in the same way and is able to respond uniquely to each of those scenarios. So that's always what we're working towards, and sometimes that's large programs and sometimes that's really small specific programs, but it has to be diverse programs that meet a variety of needs. So we have the Johnson Street Shelter as kind of our lowest barrier option in Missoula, and then various steps along the way. We have Poverello Center and the Meadowlark shelters. We have places like the Temporary Safe Outdoor Space or Mountain Home Montana that have a lot more kind of wraparound supports and services for people, but also have higher barrier to entry. So again, kind of dependent on the individual and what their needs are, all the way up then towards housing solutions. Some have subsidies, some don't have subsidies, some are more permanent in nature, some are treatment or reuniting with family. But this is always what we're working to build out as a collective community. And when we're kind of working on setting the vision is make this bigger, do more, have more options for people. Dawn, you can go to the next one. Thank you. And then this is just kind of the task of describing this landscape in 3 to 5 minutes feels nearly impossible. But this is kind of just a very, very brief overview of what this work kind of looks like in Missoula. We actually mapped out all of the programs and services that are happening across our dozens of community partners a little over a year ago on a board table that was truly, I think, the length of this room, and it filled the entire table. That's the landscape of services that are working on this in Missoula. And so this is, just a snapshot, but it kind of gives some summary buckets of what's going on. So Missoula does have a really robust service agency network, and I guess I have these in front of me. I don't need to turn around. And it's unique. We are often in national technical assistance spaces, and many communities are awed by the ability of community partners in Missoula to work together, and the ability of community partners to work with the public sector and with local government, and the sheer volume of work that's happening in that way in Missoula. So that is truly a unique asset to our community. I won't go through all of these, but these are just some of the bigger projects we have underway, and there's a million sub-projects under each of these and dozens of agencies that are all working towards them. But to your actual question, which was kind of what are some of the key areas or spaces of need, and what we continue to come back to anytime we're talking about any sort of solution right now is funding and capacity. And the landscape for funding for houselessness in Montana is extremely limited, more so than many other states. Our state government has not dedicated much resource at all to this issue. The last legislative session did dedicate a small $5 million grant program that was available and I believe fully utilized across the state. It was up to $750,000 per county, $750,000 per county. And that's the first time they did that. So that was a really big, small but big step, and we're really excited by that and hoping there's more room to grow in that direction with our state legislature. But that's kind of unprecedented. We do not have a lot of local state support for this issue, and the federal government also isn't designating significant resource beyond what they have historically designated, with exceptions, but broadly, a lot of it is being left to localities. And other states may have levies, tax, bonds, all these different tools that are passed by their constituents in their locality, in their state, and they have funding mechanisms that just aren't available to us in the state. And we often are, folks say, what about this program in Portland or in Texas? And we look at their funding landscape and they have a levy, or they have a philanthropic sector with, Tito's Vodkas dedicating $20 million to their community village. It's just a really different reality than what we live in Montana and in Missoula. And specifically when we talk about funding, especially for operations and facility operations and for supportive services. The funding sector has moved a lot more towards funding for housing, and we're missing a lot of that funding for the services that get you from being unhoused to housing, which is shelter, which is transitional spaces, all of those components and the supportive services that people need to wrap around them. And the other really big piece is capacity. We, like I said, we have a really wide network of services, but all of those providers are doing their max. They are working so hard right now, and they've stepped up and added programs and broadened what they're already doing, added staff, but they're at their max, and we have a really high demand for services, partially because of the reality of our entire country right now, which is that houselessness is a crisis everywhere, and we're in a housing crisis, and all of these pieces are tying together to make this a challenging time, and partially because of our geographic location. We're a city in a rural environment, and so folks who are rural will come to Missoula for services. Not necessarily from other cities in the state. A lot of other cities have robust service networks as well, but that is a piece of our story, and so we are constantly trying to figure out how we build our local capacity more, or bring in capacity from elsewhere, or think differently about what we have, but our service capacity is really challenged, which of course is tied to the funding piece, but also independent.
Right.
So those would be, I think, the top two things that come to mind.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jim, do you want to build on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Would you pull up ours?
Yep.
So I put together, we're not going to do all these slides, so don't freak out. MOR has had an amazing partnership over the years with the city, and I think our primary thing that we bring to the table is always data. We have access to an enormous amount of data. So what I wanted to start out with, if you just go to the next slide. Emily talks a little bit about this, and this is actually sourced from you guys, the houseless information system. And all this graph does is tell you the story about who's the unhoused population in our community. If you go to the next slide, would you back up? Should be, well, no, that's right. Yeah, go to the next one, please. Thank you. Recently, I was in a meeting where somebody was like, well, are we seeing an increased number of houselessness people? What's the data telling us? And the coordinated entry system really gives us, the bottom line is outflow, top line is inflow. So people coming into the system versus people going out of the system.
Can you, sorry, can I interrupt? Can you define coordinated entry for folks who might not know?
I'm going to let the expert do it.
Teamwork. Yeah, so the Missoula Coordinated Entry System, coordinated entry systems are a national best practice. They came out of a piece of legislature from the federal government in 2008, the Hearth Act. And so they're a practice, a system that exists across the country. Missoula has a coordinated entry system, and really what they do is aggregate and streamline access to resources, so housing resources primarily, but also broad community resources. So their purposes are to make it easier for folks who are unhoused to find their resources and to minimize how many times they have to tell their story. So the intention is there are just a few front doors, and at all of those front doors, the person will receive the same experience, and they're entering the same database, so they should only have to go to one front door once to tell their story and give their information. Another big piece is the data collection. So that whole system, which is a system of about 40 community partners, has access to the same database, the Homeless Management Information System, and is entering data all in one so that that data can be communicated about, shared, and collectively addressed as a system. And then the other piece is to better streamline our resources and streamline access to them so that we're collectively prioritizing as a community before coordinated entry systems each organization was making their own priorities and kind of deciding how they wanted to use their own resources, and that looked really different. And so someone might have a better advocate over here, and the advocate over here might not be as strong, and so they might have a bias for what resource they have better access to. And so the coordinated entry system creates one prioritization for our entire community, so everyone is getting prioritized the same way, and therefore we're able to prioritize our most important resources for our most vulnerable neighbors.
I think we're really good as a community to be able to look at our nonprofits in town and say, here's what our capacity is to serve those in need. This system says, here's the need, here's the demand. I think the next iteration of data that you'll see over the months to come, and you guys published in May on this, around we can quantify a number of people in the system, but what's most important isn't that people are houseless, it's why. And being able to get to the why and be able to ensure that we have the resources and the nonprofits in town to support the why. So when you think about the why, first off, let me just say, as of year end, 659 people entered into the system. We didn't have data at this time to say the why they're in the system, but what we were able to do is say, okay, what's out there in terms of capacity for housing? So the left-hand side, and Emily just spoke about really the supportive model on the previous slide, is this first section starting with unsheltered to emergency shelters such as Johnson Street, TSOS, all the way to the far end where you own your property, right? So this is just the data. What I find most interesting is we as a community chose to make some big priorities over the last couple of years to address the need for supportive housing. The 185 units underneath shared equity is a new model, a community land trust, and that number, 185, I believe 75 of those units were put online just last year. So it is a big shift in how we think about it. I wouldn't say low barrier, but far more affordable than any other solution we have out there. And that's done through primarily MMCDC. Go ahead, I can never say it. North Missoula Community Development Corporation. They're doing the bulk of the work there. That shouldn't, this is a relatively new thing. No, you're good, next slide. What I would challenge you to think about is, and this was a good myth buster for me personally, why do people enter into houselessness? Why do they get on the street? So I would encourage you to think about that. And maybe when we get to Q&A, I would love to hear what the audience thinks, because some data just really myth busted for me. When I think about what the need for the community is, it is about analyzing why people are there and making sure that we can put resources to the why, not build housing. We got developers in town, people know how to build houses. We gotta solve the capacity issue, in my opinion. I was going to have Brent just do a couple of slides to talk about affordability, because I think that's a key data point.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if many of you have heard from me as well too, I've been, at least for 10 years, I've presented the Missoula Housing Report that the Missoula Organization of Realtors puts together. So all of these charts, the housing continuum we have, you can find all this on MissoulaRealEstate.com. There's a button that says Market Data. They're interactive charts, and they add explanations to them as well too. My perspective of a lot of what I speak on is much more in the realm of what I generally work in when it comes to real estate data, housing data, sales trends, and things like that. I'm also board president, and if you hadn't heard, we're talking a lot about commissions right now. We threw some slides in there, but I don't think that's really the topic today. So but if you do want to talk about how buyer side commissions are changing, I'm happy to catch you later. However, so there's a few things that we have in our housing report. And one of them is this chart right here, which is called our Housing Affordability Index. We build this annually, and then we update it quarterly. And what it basically, if you have a 100 score on the HAI, it means your median area household income compared to the median sales price, your house is like perfectly affordable based upon sales data. So obviously, I don't think it is a big surprise, though, that what we see is throughout the year, Missoula, which is our green line. I do Missoula County as our green line. The dark line on top is the U.S., and then the pink is county. And what we did also then was we broke it apart by 5% down versus 20% down on a mortgage. But what we see is that at about the point of the pandemic, and then as interest rates start rising, affordability in Missoula crashed pretty hard, and it hit points of low points that we had not seen before in my involvement in the housing report. I don't think it surprises people. Our median sales price is in the upper 500s, and our supply is still tight, and things are very challenging. And so we track this on our side as it relates to affordability. So the next thing we do then, so these next couple slides that we have, so what we did here was we mapped out every sale in 2017, and you can see this spans out. We're we're Florence, Lolo, Frenchtown, Clinton. Every green dot is a house that in effect sold at or above the HAI index. So presumably a median income could afford this, and you're not in a house poor situation or an unaffordable situation. So that's 2017. Hop me forward one. There's 2019. Keep going.
It's getting bigger.
2021. I think, is this our last one, or do we have one more?
We have one more.
Here's 2023.
Hardly any.
So it's a very telling story about the challenge of affordability, and there's a lot of factors with it. Interest rates, economic activity, supply as well too is a big factor. So a lot of what I share and talk on is this relationship, and then what this has caused for attainable housing, and its impacts on rentals as well too. And so I think our next slide this is median sales price information. This is on here. We can hop this forward one more. Yeah. Supply, this is a giant factor. So a lot of people talk about why are housing prices going up so much if Missoula incomes are generally staying flat. A lot of this story has to do with supply. So if you have an undersupply in your market, your median sales prices drive up faster than they should. And if you look at this, it was about mid-2019, we dipped below a normal supply range. At the end of Q4, when interest rates hit 8.5%, we jumped up, and now that rates are climbing back down, we're falling down again. So as long as we're under this pink line, our prices of housing are moving at a pace faster than our community can support. And so this leaves more and more people without the ability to even own houses. And we've seen this, 53% of people living in the Missoula city limits rent. So we have more renters than homeowners. Next slide, I think, is rentals. So here is a fascinating look, though. What we see, and this is a lot of stuff. This is Q1 through 4 by each year rental vacancy rate just available, and this is market rate rentals. And so what you see is the healthy range. So when you hear these crazy stories of people paying $2,000 for a studio apartment in the middle of town, well, it's because you look at these availabilities. Once again, your supply is not meeting your demand. But here's an interesting trend that's starting to creep up. Here's 2022. It's climbing back up into the normal range. And I think we're not blind. We drive around town. We've seen all the apartment buildings. I live out west of town. I'm out in 44 Ranch. And there's giant apartment buildings that are built behind me, and more coming up. Rental supply is, again, starting to rise very rapidly. If it moves into this healthy range, the theory is that rents could start leveling, going down. But for rents to drop based on what we see with supply, it's got to push north of that 8% as well. So we don't see a big indicator that rents are going to go down, but maybe we're seeing some stabilizing effects there. Okay, I think our next two slides are commissions. We'll skip.
I think that's it.
We'll
We
skip
can stop
again.
there.
We'll skip again. Love this. This is awesome.
Skip
And then I
this.
think is this
more.
one more skip ahead. See, this is great. We're just flying through this. And then you may or may not have heard, we'll just throw a quick pitch out here because applications are still open through the National Association of Realtors or Realtor Relief Foundation. If your home as a primary homeowner, or if you as a renter, or if you own a manufactured home in a park, if your structure had damage, our Realtors Relief Fund from the storm, we have funds to be able to cover up to $2,000 worth of a mortgage payment or a rent payment. And there's an application process that's screened locally here, and we were granted up to $250,000. We've processed, how many now, Jim?
70 applications in less than 2 weeks.
In less than 2 weeks. And it's meant to just kind of fill that little gap with helping you with a payment while you're trying to put your life back together from the storm damage. We still have funds.
Tell your friends and family.
Tell your friends and family. And so you can find it on MissoulaRealEstate.com. QR code's there, but just you open MissoulaRealEstate.com. There's a banner right on top. And we're just trying to help get the word out so we can help all our neighbors here. So
Awesome.
I've talked a whole bunch, I apologize. But
That's-
so I would just quickly say my aspect is kind of like I'm kind of on the far end of the continuum. But I mean, as a practitioner, born and raised here in Missoula, someone who sees people I grew up with still try to buy houses in their mid-40s, families unable to just access or buy homes. Affordability, accessibility, and attainability on my end is something that I see as the greatest challenge, because the American dream is home ownership, and it's getting tougher in Missoula, not easier. And there's a lot of different pieces to it, but that's a great challenge I see. I don't think it would be, I think the topics we're talking on here is much more of an urgent problem than what I experienced, but that's kind of my realm of what I experienced. So, yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Colin,
Did you give me your slides, or are you
Nope.
good?
I'm not that cool.
Do you want to do the commission slide?
I don't know if you want me to do the commission slides. No, but all the things I had queued up are kind of right here too. So I have a couple of points to make. I think one of them is the city's been doing a lot of work, and the state, around policies that allow us to build more housing. Building more housing is essential to get out of this problem. And I think you just made a great point about rental housing. We have almost built our way out of a rental housing problem. Right, almost. But that's pretty good. We have not done that with home ownership opportunities. That's very tough for people, and people like my kids, I'm worried for them. And houselessness and the ability to buy a home or rent, those are overlapping bubbles by quite a bit. It's the number one correlator for why people are homeless in general. So number one, we do have to build more housing. The second thing I would springboard on what Emily had said, and she had that chart of all the different steps on the continuum is really important, and I don't want to take away from that. One thing you could add to that, I don't know that it would fit, but is mental health. So addiction, mental health. Our state has really gutted mental health funding for a long time, and if you saw the legislature kind of come up with a windfall at the last cycle, they did dedicate quite a bit towards behavioral health. Where that money goes and how it lands is still to be determined, but there's definitely some rebuilding of the mental health infrastructure that needs to happen. So there are nonprofits out there that are working on that I could talk about more. We're working with a couple of them right now. But yeah.
great. Okay, so I'm going to ask the next question of the people in the room. Thanks to Jim's suggestion here. I would like to know if anybody would like to volunteer, what do you think the leading cause of houselessness is? What's the impetus that gets people into a situation where they're unhoused?
Well, for women, it's domestic violence.
Yeah.
Domestic violence? Anybody else?
You've run out of resources in your own safety net.
Lack of a safety net? Anybody else?
Mental health.
Okay.
I don't know how to condense this to one word or a phrase, but something small, right? Like your tires pop or something, and you have to buy new tires, which depletes your safety net, and then you lose your job, and then you end up not being able to pay your rent. So something, I guess, the snowball effect.
Right. Great. All right, and Jim, I'm going to come back to you. How did we do?
Yeah, really good. It's Emily's report that I'm referencing. I just read snippets of it yesterday. For me, I always think mental health is the number one reason people end up houseless. But the study showed that mental health, which probably covers addiction, right? I'm sorry, I meant to say addiction. Number two, jobs. And then number three, family conflict or domestic violence. How did I do?
Yeah,
Top three.
those are the top three. And what I would add is mental health is, there's a lot of misconceptions. Mental health and houselessness is complex. And there's a lot of misconceptions around what that relationship looks like. And yes, some people become unhoused because of mental health, but a lot of times those two things are correlated in that maybe you lose your job or you pop your tires and you become unhoused, and then the mental health comes up and it keeps you unhoused. Being unhoused is extremely traumatizing, and that trauma creates mental health conflicts that may not have been there in the first place, but may be the reason that someone remains unhoused for a period of time. Same with addiction. A lot of times people start using substances because they need to stay awake and vigilant at night, or because the people around them are using them and that's what their social network is doing. There's a lot of different reasons, but it's a survival tactic. And so again, it's oftentimes houselessness comes first, and then the mental health and addiction comes second, but it is the reason people are staying in that experience. But yeah, job loss, family conflict, and I think, all of your reasons are also right. That's the reality of houselessness, is that it's unique for everyone. But Jim is absolutely right. On our report, the top 3 reasons that people reported were mental health, job loss, and family conflict.
Interesting. So be thinking about your own questions, because I'm going to give everybody a chance to ask questions. But I thought I would lead off with one of my own. Something we've been seeing a lot in the news lately is around houselessness is urban camping and the changes in city policy there. And I want to just acknowledge for a minute that there is room for everybody to be compassionate and at the same time concerned about the safety of their families. And so I guess my question really is it a question of messaging, or how do we tackle this dichotomy between I care about our unhoused population and at the same time that NIMBY attitude, that feeling of, but I don't want them camping across the street from my kids' elementary school? Who wants to tackle that one?
Just a softball.
Sorry.
I think it's okay to hold 2 opposing things simultaneously. I just believe when somebody gets emotionally stuck, I always try to say, what's the second emotion behind it? Because there's always 2. And I think that's the same story, that we can be compassionate and caring and also believe that parks are for a safe place for kids to play, and both of those things are okay to hold at the same time.
Does the 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. rule try to address that? Is that how that developed, or?
I think, the ordinance itself developed out of a series of, so many conversations, but there was a formalized series of working group meetings. There were 5 of them. The mayor convened an urban camping working group, and at the end of that, those meetings, the group put forth some suggestions, and then city council took those suggestions and did their best to kind of make something work that met the needs of everyone, because ultimately that's the task of our city council and our mayor, is to meet the needs of everyone, which is truly a bit of an impossible task. And I was in a conversation with the mayor today talking about this, and we kind of came to, the root is, as you said, I care. Whether you're upset because you feel like your family is unsafe, or you're upset because you feel like people don't have a place to be outside, the root is I care about something. And I think what often is missing is the actual conversation in person and the relationship. A lot of the rhetoric gets blown up and exacerbated behind screens or on forums, or in these various online spaces, and there's not as much of the in-person relationship and communication that would break those down simply by the nature of looking in someone's eyes and saying I care. So I think that's a piece of it. But yes, to your question, the 8 to 8 I think is a way of saying, these people are our neighbors. Because they don't have a house doesn't make them not a Missoulian. It doesn't make them not our neighbor. And we need them to have a place to be. And people are fearful about what that looks like in our community. And so how do we find a middle ground there? And I think, we are lucky to have elected officials who are willing to try new things and be responsive to the moment. And it means we're learning in real time. And that is hard.
Sure.
It's okay to say not in my backyard, but I think you got to follow it up with what is okay. And I think so often we want, and me included, I don't want this here, but I don't offer a solution. And I think we have, as citizens, people who live in this community, have an obligation to go back to our neighborhoods and have that dialogue with each other about what can we do, either through your neighborhood councils, just block parties. Have that dialogue.
I think Missoula's a special place in that sense that I think a lot of our community wants to try to come to a solution. We might not agree on everything, but you go around the state, I mean, Emily, maybe you can attest, I don't think other towns are trying to come together with collaborative solutions like we are, and I hear about that from my colleagues around, or people moving here or coming here. So just being a lifelong Missoulian, I do love that we are attempting to do as much as we can to try to tackle it, come up with solutions and help people, rather than just block it out or just view it as a big negative and fight about things. And there's tough words about it, but I do like the way our community is attempting to come to solutions here.
Yeah, this is all a symptom of our failings as a society in general, right? Not funding mental health, not building enough housing. I mean, and we're all here because we care. So I'm super grateful to have this be the topic. It's such a raw spot for so many people, and like, I think we just got to own that we've all failed a little bit, right, in this kind of realm. And we're now in a position where there's stuff that's happening and people are doing stuff right here. You know, that's really cool.
Does anybody have a pressing question? I have more, but if any,
Can I just add something to what Colin just said, though? Because I think it's so important, too, when we live with such scarcity and fear-based, like, you know, that talk that what Melise said about a flat tire could be the difference between having house keys or not, right? Kind of place. The other area, what I would ask us, me anyways, I ask myself often to consider, yeah, whatever, I'm just gonna say it, ask us to consider too is how we come together as a community and see each other. Because often, when that person's sitting outside with the sign, or that person is walking with their 2 kids and all their belongings on their back, it's painful to look. But if we don't look, see, hear, and acknowledge, then we can't do anything different. But and then my next thing is actually Molly's last thing about the impact, so I'm not gonna steal her thunder, because that was her birthday yesterday. But I'm really grateful for you, and I'm grateful that MCAT's here recording this, so I can listen again.
But you could also point out too, like, individuals experiencing homelessness, it's not always just the visible, the person with the sign. It's kids sleeping on friends' couches and you know, but it's just like sometimes there's such an invisible layer that's missed too.
30 years
least
ago
in
at this
public
time,
art.
I was an unhoused active drug addict. I'm just gonna put that out there. So it really is an issue that hits close to home. Like, I've been clean almost 30 years, but thankfully I remember where I come from. That's a scary thing for people to look at, but if we don't talk to each other and have that way to talk about it. So this is huge. I'll be quiet again.
No.
All my feelers are up, which I'm grateful for. Always a good sign when the feelers are up.
yes, Marcy.
I'm curious, I mean, I think we like constantly talk about this sort of like national housing crisis, but I feel like Missoula is this special place, and similar to other places like Missoula, we could like Boulder or wherever else you want to name out there. I feel like our crisis is even more pointed because I feel like we have this like pull of this like beautiful place that people want to live, and all of us created it, right? Like Missoula was created by the people, but I feel like our crisis isn't going to go away with, you know, other solutions as some places in the United States, and I'm just curious if that conversation is being had at all, and we're unique because we're not a tourist town, right? We're not like, it's not like Vail's going to pay for housing for their employees or something. So I think we have a really unique situation.
I think we did something at TSOS last year, 2 years ago.
Oh gosh, it started in 2020.
2020, just as COVID. Are people familiar with TSOS, temporary outdoor shelter
Very
space?
safe outdoor space.
Temporary. Can you talk a little bit about the stats? What was it, 60%? Let's just say approximately 100 people utilized that opportunity for a safe space. 60 of the 100 moved out of that temporary space into some type of supportive housing. We believe that some of that, sorry?
I think that was even higher.
Yeah, that's the number from maybe 8 months ago, so maybe it is a little higher. We believe that why that model worked Yes, it costs money, but it was wraparound supportive services for everybody who went in there, and there was requirements to get in there. So that model works. The challenge is, how do we as a community scale that to get to the 600 people that need it? I don't know that other communities, you probably know better, other communities that have tried that. I know that even Billings is trying to stand something like this up.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in that model. The other reality with the temporary safe outdoor space, it is an incredibly successful model. And as you mentioned, and I think I mentioned earlier, it has a lot of rules and regulations, and it is a higher barrier shelter. And that means that there's a specific population of folks for whom it's going to be a fit. And there's also a large population of folks for whom it's not. And so for the population for whom it's a fit, it is incredibly successful. It's an incredible model. They wrap around with case management, and there are really incredible, I don't have the stats memorized off the top of my head, but incredible outcomes moving out of that space. The reality is that it's not for everyone. We need shelters that can meet people who maybe don't fit well in a high barrier environment for whatever reason. And maybe it's one step lower, or maybe it's all the way the lowest barrier, but we also need those, and the outcomes and the programs needed to support folks in those different environments look really different. So that's just an important piece to I think keep in mind as we talk about scaling the TSOS. Yes, that site has a super long wait list all the time, and it would be incredible to have another one. And we also need, again, to be creating multiple unique solutions. And to your point, Missoula is good at that. We created the temporary safe outdoor space, and now there's people all across the country that are calling us about it. We also created a housing solutions fund, which is this incredible flexible financial assistance fund. It's pretty innovative. There aren't a lot of we're also getting requests from other communities about how we created it, and we took a model from Seattle and adapted to fit our community. But it's also a pretty low barrier access fund. It's really intended to just meet gap needs. And it can be used for all kinds of things. The concept behind it is most funding sources have requirements. They have regulations. You have to give them certain materials. There's all these steps, and it takes a long time, and it's hard to get through it. And we just wanted to create something that was like, you need a gap in 24 hours, here it is. Like, if you can tell us how it will get you to your housing solutions, we trust you. You know your life better than we do, and we're going to fill the gap for you. And that's how we created the fund. And
Managed through?
United Way, Human Resource Council, and the City of Missoula. Partnership between the three. It was created by the city and United Way back also in 2020. A lot of these things came about with COVID funding and now need to be sustained, but that's the piece of it. Now it needs to be sustained. Because we are in a housing challenge and funding challenge, it gets spent really fast. People need gap funding all the time. We just reopened it in July and have already spent nearly $100,000 out of it. So that is, I think, one of our community's primary tools for prevention and for diversion for folks who maybe have just become houseless, but we're trying to get them so they don't even have to enter the shelter system or access services, or folks who are utilizing services, but we can get them out quickly because they can pull on whatever strengths and resources they have. So that is, again, a creative, unique tool created in Missoula. Things like Shelter Court, there was an article about that recently. That's really unique and innovative and created by brilliant creative minds in Missoula. So we are innovating in a really unique way. It's how do we scale those things? Where do we find the funding? How do we find the capacity to keep them going after we start them kind of with a great idea or a little pot of funding, and then that disappears.
Oh, over here and then over here. Yeah, Kathy.
I'm wondering if there's a target in terms of percentages for amounts of rentals, amounts of single-family homes, and then subsidized housing. Is there something? And also, any of you could speak to what happens. I actually just Googled. I was curious. Homeownership in the U.S., which is at about 65%. So I guess we're below that. But what happens in a community where do we know what happens when homeownership slips below a certain level, or is there like an optimum?
Start at that end of the table.
Optimum percentage.
Well, the city is right now. I'm curious how you guys are. You've got a lot more data than I do, but the city's been using numbers like we need to be building 1,100 dwelling units a year. Missoula typically builds between 400 and 500. So we're not even building half of what we need. And I don't have quite the the breakdown on the top of my head of sort of rental versus ownership opportunities. But I actually did just look at this. Our I don't know what our target is, but what we've been doing is 60 to 80% of our units have been rentals, right? So we're not creating enough ownership opportunities. How am I doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and the city would be really open in permitting, that there was a concerted effort to prioritize multiplex and stand up more housing units than single family. So the data reflects that was the target, and we were doing it. The thing that we like to talk about, our data committee that produces all this data is a community partner effort. City sits at the table with us. We look at as trying to get housing at all price points. And the challenge of home ownership is you look at the 0 to 350.
Doesn't exist.
There's nothing on the market.
Yeah.
And when the market gets frozen in any single price point, that has a ripple effect on freezing all price points. Now, on the high end, the 1.5 plus, million plus, those are sitting longer. But there's no opportunity for people to step up. So we got to unfreeze it. We just got to build.
Yeah, and I mean, Missoula, for as long as we've put our data together, has always kind of been on that 50-50. So we didn't, over the last at least 15 years or so, suddenly go from 60-40 and flip over. The funny thing is, if you do go to Missoula County, outside of the city limits, it's 60% ownership to 40% renters. So it's not like the vision's way beyond or something. I think on a density side as well too. I mean, we need to build more. We have not kept up. It's been since the Great Recession, the burst of the bubble, that the U.S. Missoula stopped building at the pace we needed to meet just growth and demand. And so we're in a big hole. But there's a lot of factors to it: labor, infrastructure, a lot of things like that.
So I just want to bring our attention to the time.
Yeah, I was.
And, sorry.
You're
Is
good.
that what you're going to do?
Yeah, you're good. I was going to say, so I know that our panelists will probably be willing to hang around and answer specific questions, but before we end the program officially, I did want to ask sort of our important question as a giving circle, which is we have a fairly modest grant of $15,000 to give, and we want to give it intelligently, and that's why we have forums like this to discuss. But I wanted to get our panelists' thoughts on where can that grant move the needle? I mean, we're talking about a big issue that's not going to be solved easily with a little bit of money, but where can we actually help with our grant? Let's go this way since we started the other direction.
Shoot, I mean, there's so many needs, right? And there's needs sitting in this room, and like all of the nonprofits in Missoula would love to have their needle moved. And I've worked with the YWCA on the Meadowlark and Missoula Interfaith Collaborative. I'm working right now with youth homes on a crisis kind of teen. That's part of that mental health continuum for teens. Western Montana Mental Health Clinic has another crisis center for adults. There's United Way doing great work. We could go on, right? So anybody.
Work giving to the United Way, like what needle could we affect? We're not going to build houses.
You could. Their fund. They're sort of prevention. What's it
The
called?
Housing Solutions Fund. You stole my answer. That was going to be my answer.
Yeah.
Can I speak? It's my turn.
Just adding to that increment to make the bigger change.
Yeah.
I too would vote the Housing Solutions Fund. I would also pitch Homeward is a vital community partner here in Missoula. Our mayor was director of Homeward. I do education courses there for first-time buyers. They also do credit counseling, and they manage a lot of assistive housing as well too. There's always a great need there for Homeward. It's an excellent crew. They're amazing community partners here all across the housing spectrum. So they're wonderful as well. And I think any sort of donation to them, I mean, it could hit assistive housing for low-income tenants. It could help education for either foreclosure prevention or first-time buyer education. So there could be a couple things there.
Wow. Yes, for United Way, I think they really get the funds out there quickly. I sit on the board of directors for youth homes, so my bias would be with youth homes. I think we're making some huge transformational changes there. And youth homes not only works in Missoula, but other communities, and takes kids that are in crisis for various reasons and helps them become self-sustaining. We have two great homes in town that kids, we work with youth to be able to get their first apartment. So, so many choices.
Yeah.
So basically, you're saying we're not gonna make a bad choice.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Good luck
Wow.
deciding.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the Housing Solutions Fund at United Way, but I also know that there's a huge need for services specific to young people in our community, particularly those young people who are unhoused. But the Housing Solutions Fund is it is a direct to consumer, for lack of a better word, fund, and sometimes all someone needs is $50. Sometimes they need $500. You know, it's like small things, and the fund is built that any referral has to be connected to a temporary or permanent housing solution, so you know that when the funds are being deployed, it's getting someone stabilized. And it can be used for, you know, the traditional things like deposit, you know, rent down a few months of rent ahead of time when you're putting down your deposit. It can be used for application fees, but it can also be used for really creative things. Like someone recently needed hearing aids because they couldn't do their job without them, and they were at risk of losing their house and being evicted because they had lost their hearing aids. And so we bought them hearing aids. Like it can be really creative uses like that what other fund is gonna be able to fill that gap? So I just think it's a really transformative and incredible tool, and it really is strengths-based. It's working with people in their own experience, so.
That's awesome.
That's my plug.
Okay. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
And I'll put you on the spot and say, will you have some conversations on the side here, folks?
Absolutely.
Happy to.
Before we wrap up, just a reminder of key dates for members. And again, the winner will be announced. Did you see that it's 15,000? Terry's our former steering committee chair, so I got pretty excited when I saw you walk in. Glad you made it here. And our two runner-ups get 1,000 unrestricted, because we don't want them to be limited to a program or project that $1,000 may not fund. So anyways, but I want to give a huge shout out again to Katie Vaughn, the events crew, Kathy Wachowski, and all the steering committee members, and all of you. And again, for our finalist presentation, if you want to follow us, you're welcome to come to all our stuff.
Yeah.
Right, but you need to be a woman and non-binary to join us and a member to vote. But it's not like we wouldn't want to hear what you had to say. So you're welcome to join. All our events are open to all people, not just members. And again, the more we see here and acknowledge each other,
QR code
the more
over here
impact we're gonna have.
to join with
So-
Kathy, and
do
I'll
without
just remind
QR
people
codes.
too about MissoulaRealEstate.com. Let your friends and neighbors know if they still are struggling because of storm damage,
And I have a
that more is there to help.
And Molly, thank you. Excellent moderator. Especially because we didn't have our normal little chit chats about how we're gonna work together. I think we did pretty good.
And we sang.